I was in a horrific accident and left deaf in one ear. My brother laughed and said, "Guess now you'll stop pretending to matter." They mocked me at family dinner with whispers I couldn't hear. Then I discovered they'd sold my jewelry to pay off his gambling debt. I've been quiet, but that ends now. They just got served. They're wailing, "You were supposed to love us." I'm Lydia Fairburn, 42, I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. Picture the live oaks, the cobblestones, the pastel-colored homes in the historic district. It's gorgeous, on the outside. Inside, my childhood was more like a painting someone kept touching up to hide the cracks. My parents, Roy and May Fairburn, loved the performance of a perfect family. Church every Sunday, social functions, baking casseroles for new neighbors. That version of us looked great on paper. But behind the drawn curtains, things weren't so gracious. My brother, Silas, was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong, even as he racked up suspension after suspension, wrecked 2 cars, and blew through money like it was scratch paper. He had charm, I'll give him that, he could lie straight to your face with a grin. And it worked. Every time. Meanwhile, I was the older one. Responsible. Predictable. Maybe even boring. I followed the rules, got good grades, moved out at 19 to go to college in Atlanta, got married at 27, divorced at 34. No kids. My life wasn't exciting, but it was mine. After the divorce, I stayed in Atlanta. My ex-husband, Vaughn, had been a smooth-talking real estate agent who loved other women almost as much as he loved closing a deal. When I found out he'd been sleeping with a junior agent, and that she was pregnant, I left. I didn't look back. My relationship with my family has always been polite. Surface level. I sent birthday cards. Called on holidays. I came home twice a year, and each time I'd leave with that same tight feeling in my chest. The kind you get when you realize no matter how much you do, you'll always be the backup dancer in someone else's spotlight. But everything changed in one brutal instant. It was late last year. I had driven to Augusta for a client dinner, nothing fancy, just trying to close a contract for the firm. It was pouring on the way home. The roads were slick, visibility was crap, and I should have pulled over. But I didn't. A pickup blew through a stop sign, slammed right into my passenger side, and shoved my car into a tree. I don't remember the moment of impact. Just light, then darkness, then beeping. I woke up in the ICU 2 days later, face wrapped, ribs broken, jaw wired, and a burning pain that felt like it was coming from inside my ear. Turns out, my eardrum has ruptured. And despite the surgery, the hearing in my left ear was gone. Permanently. People don't realize how much they take for granted being able to hear the world in stereo. The loss threw me off balance, literally. I had to relearn to walk straight. I'd bump into door frames. I'd miss half of the conversations unless I was perfectly positioned. It was humiliating. I felt broken. And the people I hoped would care? They couldn't even be bothered. My parents visited once in the hospital. May brought a crossword book. Roy scrolled through emails on his phone. They stayed 20 minutes. Silas never came. I got out 6 weeks later. Spent another 3 weeks in physical therapy. Tried to rebuild some semblance of routine. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from May, "Dinner Sunday. Family's asking for you." It's time. Time for what, exactly, she didn't say. I should have known better. But I went. The house looked the same. Same chipped porch paint, same lace curtains. I walked in and instantly felt 12 again. Silas was already there, lounging in the living room like a king with his court, his latest girlfriend, forgot her name, drinking wine and laughing too loud. When he saw me, he smirked and leaned in close, on my deaf side. "Guess now you'll stop pretending to matter," he said, loudly and slowly like I was stupid, not deaf. I stared at him. He laughed. No one stopped him. My mother had the nerve to giggle into her wine glass. Roy didn't even look up. That dinner was torture. I sat at the long oak table like a stranger in my own family. They whispered on my left side, snide little barbs, half sentences, barely masked contempt. "She's just so sensitive now, always acted like she was better, what a drama queen." I ate in silence, every bite tasting like ash. I left halfway through dessert. No one walked me to the door. 2 weeks later, I went back to the family house to get some of my things out of the attic. I hadn't touched my grandmother's old jewelry box since she passed, but I needed to feel connected to something that reminded me I had value, something that came from a woman who loved me. But the box was gone. I searched everywhere. Pushed aside dusty Christmas ornaments, photo albums, and old sled from the 90s. Nothing. I asked May about it in the kitchen. She didn't even flinch. Oh, that? Silas took it. He needed it more than you. I beg your pardon? He sold it, Lydia. He was in a tough spot. You weren't even wearing the pieces. That box held generations of heirloom jewelry. A ruby ring from the 1800s. An emerald pin from my great-grandmother's wedding. Items entrusted to me in her will. And they let him pawn it? They didn't just let him, they encouraged it. He was drowning in debt, May said, like it justified theft. Family comes first, Roy added, as if that explained everything. I walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just went back to Atlanta and hired a private investigator. And oh, did he find things? Silas wasn't just in debt. He was buried. Over $50,000 owed to loan sharks, private poker games in Macon, even a shady underground gambling ring out of Jacksonville. He'd used my name, on pawnshop records. May had signed as a witness on the transaction. The pawn ticket showed my birthdate and a forged signature. It was theft. Fraud. Identity misuse. And that was when I knew, it was over. For once in my life, I wasn't going to take it quietly. I didn't sleep the night I got the investigator's full report. I just sat at my kitchen table in Atlanta, every document spread out in front of me, copies of pawn slips, bank transfers, cell phone screenshots, even a grainy security cam photo of Silas standing at the counter of a pawn shop in Macon holding the rosewood box. It was all right there. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd stolen from me, lied in my name, mocked me to my face while I was still reeling from a trauma that could have killed me. I had options. I could confront them again, scream until I lost my voice, demand apologies that would never come. But what was the point? They had never seen me as a person with value. Only as someone who could be mined for what they needed, then discarded. The accident had made me physically weaker, sure. But emotionally? That's when I became dangerous. Because something in me snapped, and it snapped clean. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a pit bull of a woman named Marianne Crick, recommended by a friend who'd used her in a brutal probate case. Marianne was the kind of woman who wore black suits in August heat and had absolutely no time for sentimentality. After reviewing the documents, she looked at me across her desk and said simply, "We have them." She explained everything clearly. Identity theft. Fraud. Conversion of property. We could press criminal charges. But that wasn't my goal, not at first. I didn't want Silas in jail. I wanted them to feel what I had felt for 42 years, powerless, unheard, invisible. So we filed a civil suit. I was suing my parents and my brother for the value of the stolen jewelry, damages for emotional distress, and legal fees. The number we submitted? $147,000. That wasn't just the cost of the heirlooms, it was also the interest, the insult, the decades of quiet dismissal. 3 weeks later, Marianne had a process server deliver the papers right to their porch on a sunny Wednesday morning. May opened the door in her housecoat. Silas was asleep on the couch. Roy was in the garage. It must have been quite the scene. I know this because they called me. Repeatedly. First May. You're blowing this out of proportion, Lydia. You should have come to us like family. Then Roy. This isn't the way good daughters treat their parents. And finally Silas. You seriously want to destroy your own brother's life over some jewelry? Are you that bitter? No one apologized. No one said they were sorry for what they did. Only that I was wrong to do anything about it. I blocked them all. The next week, I got a formal response from their attorney, some crusty old man they'd used for real estate paperwork in the past. He offered to resolve the matter privately with a lowball settlement of $10,000. Marianne laughed out loud when she read it. They're panicking, she said. They think you're bluffing. I wasn't. What followed were the most surreal weeks of my life. Depositions. Evidence exchanges. Statements under oath. I sat in a room across from my own mother while she pretended to not remember signing the pawnshop form. She said she thought Lydia had given permission. Did she? The attorney asked. I assumed she did, she said, eyes flickering. I stared at her the whole time. Not with hatred. With clarity. This woman didn't even know me. And I had spent my entire life trying to earn her approval. Silas tried his old charm, even in the deposition room. Look, I was in a tough spot, okay, he said, palms up like he was some misunderstood victim. I was gonna pay her back. Eventually. You never spoke to her about it, did you? The lawyer asked. Silas shrugged. I knew she'd freak out. That was their defense. That I was too emotional to trust with my own property. While all this was happening, something strange began to unfold. I started to feel lighter. It was subtle at first. The absence of phone calls. The quiet of not constantly being reminded that I wasn't enough for them. I began to sleep better. Ate more. I even joined a local community pottery class, not because I was particularly artistic, but because it gave me something to do with my hands that wasn't gripping a pen in fury. I told no one outside of my closest circle what was going on. No public Facebook rants. No revenge posts. No drama. Just silence. Strategic, focused, empowered silence. Then came the court date. They'd asked for a closed hearing, didn't want the community to hear about it. Probably didn't want their church friends or country club neighbors catching wind of the ungrateful daughter suing her poor family. But I didn't care. I walked into that courthouse in a tailored navy blue dress with my head high and documents in hand. Marianne was a wall of calm beside me. Across the aisle, they all sat together. Silas in a wrinkled suit, trying to look clean-cut. May with pearls that weren't hers, she had sold the real ones, no doubt. Roy in his old blazer, clenching his jaw. They didn't look like victims. They looked like people who had been caught. When the judge asked if I had a statement, I stood. My name is Lydia Fairburn, I said, voice steady, even with the hearing imbalance making the courtroom feel off-center. And this isn't about jewelry. This is about a lifetime of being used, belittled, and discarded by people who were supposed to love me. I survived a car accident that changed my life, and instead of comfort, I was mocked. Instead of care, I was stolen from. And when I finally stood up for myself, they acted like I was a traitor. Silas shifted in his seat. May actually started dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I'm not asking for revenge, I said. I'm asking for recognition. And accountability. The judge nodded. Noted for the record. We were dismissed for the day. The final decision would come in writing within a few weeks. Marianne was confident. So was I. Even if we lost, which we wouldn't, I had done something I'd never done before. I chose me. The day after the hearing, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove out to Tybee Island. There's something about the sound of waves, lopsided in my ears though it was, that helped me breathe again. I sat on a bench, hair whipping across my face, letting the salt sting my skin. It reminded me I was still here. Still solid. Not the ghost of the girl my family had always treated like a shadow. That week, I took time off work. I told my team at the firm that I needed some mental space, and to their credit, they gave it to me, no prying questions, just understanding. Funny how strangers can be more decent than your own family. I spent the days quietly, reclaiming the space in my life I hadn't realized had been taken. I reorganized my apartment, got a haircut, and donated boxes of things that reminded me of who I used to be. I even cleared out the bottom drawer in my bedroom, the one I hadn't touched in years, where I found an old birthday card from May. The front read "To my darling girl," but inside, all it said was "Don't work too hard." No signature. Just that. I threw it away. 3 weeks passed before we got the letter. Marianne called me first. They're offering a full settlement, she said, barely able to contain her smirk over the phone. $147,000 in cash. Plus $6,000 for legal fees. No admission of wrongdoing, but they're ready to sign. I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly. Just validated. They're doing it to save face, I said. Of course they are, she replied. But they're also doing it because we had them cornered. I met her at her office the next morning to sign. I read every page carefully. My name, Lydia M. Fairburn, was typed neatly in bold at the top. They'd agreed to pay in full within 60 days. Failure to do so would revert the case to a full trial, with additional charges possible. At the bottom of the settlement was a line that made me pause. The plaintiff agrees to cease contact with the defendants outside of legal obligation. They wanted me gone. Cut off. Wiped clean from their narrative. And I realized I was okay with that. But of course, silence doesn't sit well with people who thrive on control. Just days after the agreement was signed, I started getting the messages. First, it was a letter from May. Handwritten. Thick cursive, perfume-scented envelope like she still thought she was some southern matriarch from a dime store novel. I don't know what got into you, Lydia. We've always done the best we could. Silas may have made mistakes, but he's family. I hope one day you can remember that love matters more than money. Then came the texts, from a number I didn't recognize. This is your brother. I'm not mad, but I am disappointed. We were supposed to protect each other. You could have talked to me. You didn't have to humiliate us. You'll regret this when we're all gone. I didn't answer any of them. A week later, I got a knock on my apartment door. When I peeked through the peephole, I saw her, May, standing with a box in her arms, rain spotting her blouse, lips pursed like she'd just chewed glass. I didn't open the door. She stood there for several minutes before finally leaving the box on the doormat and walking off without a word. Inside were photos. Old family pictures. Me and Silas on the beach in 1989. Christmas in the living room with a hideous tree we'd fought over decorating. My graduation. Their wedding anniversary dinner. On top of the pile was a sticky note, "These belong to you. Since you're no longer part of us." I stared at that note for a long time. What they didn't understand, what they never understood, is that it was never about the jewelry. Not really. It was about what the jewelry represented. Generations of trust. Of legacy. Love passed from hand to hand, mother to daughter. They shattered that. The settlement money came through in 2 payments. Clean. Efficient. No messages, no drama. I opened a separate account for it. Not because I needed the money, I'd done well enough on my own, but because I wanted to honor what had been taken from me. I used part of it to create something small but meaningful. A scholarship fund. Under my grandmother's name, Edith Jean Fairburn. For young women pursuing arts and humanities in Georgia. Especially those with hearing impairments. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't huge. But it felt right. Like something Grandma Edith would have smiled at. I even received a letter from one of the first recipients, a girl from Macon studying music therapy, who'd lost partial hearing as a child. She ended the letter with, "Thank you for believing in people like me. You gave me more than money, you gave me proof that we matter." I sat on my couch for a while after reading that. One good ear, one dead one, and a heart finally quiet. But silence didn't last. 6 weeks after the settlement, I got an email from Marianne. Short. Barely 2 lines. "Heads up, Silas has filed a motion. He wants to contest the settlement based on emotional coercion. We'll handle it." I laughed when I read it. Actually, I laughed out loud. Of course he did. Because losing was never something Silas could accept, not even when it was earned. We filed a countermotion immediately. Marianne wasn't worried. But still, the idea that he was still trying to worm his way out of responsibility. It pulled me back. Back into the family's twisted orbit. Back into memories I didn't want. Like the time I was 12 and Silas had taken $20 from my desk drawer, then watched as I got grounded for lying when I told our parents. Or when he dented the neighbor's car and Roy paid it off quietly, then lectured me about the value of family reputation. Or the time I had the flu for a week and May told me not to make a big deal out of it because Silas was going through a rough patch with a breakup. Decades of erasure. And now, even with everything on paper, signed and sealed, he wanted to erase it again. Only this time, I had something I'd never had before. Proof. Power. Boundaries. And the will to see this fight through to the very end. The legal process dragged on for another 2 months, but this time, I wasn't shaken. Silas's motion was, as Marianne called it, laughably desperate. He claimed I manipulated our aging parents into signing the settlement and caused him emotional harm. Never mind the ironclad documentation, the paper trail, or the video evidence from the pawn shop. In his mind, he was the victim, and I was just the bitter spinster sister trying to ruin the family. What Silas didn't realize, what none of them ever seemed to grasp, was that this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about drawing a line. A permanent, unmoving, bright red line. The judge denied the motion. Flat out. No merit, no basis, and in fact, Silas's attempt to retract a legal settlement was deemed an abuse of the court's time. Marianne smirked as she handed me the ruling. But I wasn't done. Because the settlement wasn't revenge. Not really. It was just the beginning. I had something else in motion. A quiet, methodical plan that I'd been working on since the day I read that sticky note in the photo box: "These belong to you. Since you're no longer part of us." My family had always cared about appearances. Roy and May thrived on reputation, church picnics, charity luncheons, being known as upstanding. Silas had the same pride but more fragile. He liked to pretend he was the charming black sheep, the lovable rogue. He fancied himself a bit of a local celebrity at poker games and club nights. So I hit them where it hurt most, their image. It started with a carefully worded letter to the Church Council of St. Bart's Episcopal, where my parents had been fixtures for 30 years. I didn't write it as a bitter daughter, I wrote it as a concerned member of the community, detailing how Roy and May had enabled fraud and identity theft within their own family and tried to silence accountability with money. Attached were legal documents. Public record. Just facts. Then I contacted the local women's foundation, where May served on the board. I submitted a request for her to be removed from her advisory role, citing ethical concerns. I attached the same documents. The foundation, which funded scholarships and domestic wellness programs, had zero tolerance for financial misconduct. Within weeks, May was quietly asked to resign. Roy didn't get hit quite as hard, but he stopped being asked to speak at veteran fundraisers. Invitations dried up. Calls went unanswered. And Silas? Silas got it worst of all. I sent an anonymous tip to the Savannah Sun, the kind of local newspaper that thrives on small-town scandals. I knew someone in their editorial team, an old classmate I hadn't seen in years. I didn't even have to say much. Just enough to point them toward court records: a disgraced local gambler who forged a relative's signature to pay off gambling debts, and used family ties to avoid jail. They ran a piece in the Sunday edition: "A house built on bets, Savannah man at center of family fraud scandal." They didn't name me. They didn't need to. Silas's face was right there on page 3. Blurred photo from his court hearing. Underneath it, phrases like allegations of identity fraud, family betrayal, and unpaid personal loans. He called me 13 times the day that ran. I never picked up. He emailed me once. A single line. "I hope you're proud of yourself." I was. Not because I had destroyed him, but because I had finally equalized the imbalance that had defined my entire life. And then, I really began to live. I sold my Atlanta condo and bought a small craftsman-style home in Asheville, North Carolina. Quiet, green, artsy. It was far enough from Savannah that I could breathe, but close enough to drive if I ever needed closure, which I doubted I would. I started teaching finance courses at a community college. I launched a blog helping women recover financially from divorce and family betrayal. I even did a guest talk at a conference for adult survivors of narcissistic family systems. For the first time, my voice mattered. I met people who saw me, not the version filtered through guilt, obligation, and manipulation, but me. People who didn't talk around my deaf side. Who didn't treat my trauma like an inconvenience. I even started dating again. Slowly. Carefully. A man named Jasper from Asheville's Co-op Garden. Quiet hands, loud laugh. He never once asked me about my family, not until I told him. And when I did, he just said, "Good for you." Some people spend their whole lives trying to get people like that to change. But you changed yourself. That's the hardest thing. The last time I ever heard from any of them was just after Christmas. A card. No return address. Inside was a photo of the family at some church event. Everyone was smiling but looking stiff. On the back, in May's handwriting, "We're sorry for how things turned out. Hope you're well. M." I burned the card in my fireplace. Not out of hate. Out of freedom. I didn't need their version of peace. I had made my own. People think revenge is about fire and fury. Screaming matches. Tables flipped. Dramatic exits. But the best revenge, the kind that really lasts, is quiet. Strategic. It's creating a life so far beyond the reach of the people who once belittled you that they can't even recognize the woman you've become. I didn't ruin them. They did that themselves. All I did was make sure the truth finally had a place to live. And it lives here, in this home, in this peace, in the sound of my one good ear catching birdsong in the morning as I sip my coffee and remind myself, I wasn't wrong to stand up for myself. I was just late doing it. But I'm right on time now.